According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Muslims make up 2.6% of the Australian population in 2016. That means there are approximately 600,000 Muslims. That total Muslim population makes the second largest religious group in Australia. The Australian Muslim community is fragmented into not only the traditional sectarian divisions of what each sect defines as Islam, but it is also extremely diverse racially, ethnically, culturally, and linguistically. Islam has been in Australia since beginning of the 18th century, when Moccasin traders were long-term visitors to Arnhem Land, now Northern Territory. Indonesian Muslims Trapanjers from the southwest corner of Sulawesi visited the coast of northern Australia from at least the 18th century to collect and process trepang, a marine invertebrate prized for its culinary and medicinal values in Chinese markets. A number of Mohammedans were listed in the musters of 1802, 1811, 1822, and the 1828 census, and a small number of Muslims arrived during the convict period. Beyond this, Muslims generally are not thought to have settled in large numbers in other regions of Australia until 1860. Among the early Muslims were the Afghan camel drivers, who migrated to and settled in Australia during the mid to late 19th century. Between 1860 and the 1890s, a number of Central Asians came to Australia to work as camel drivers. The first camel drivers arrived in Melbourne, Victoria, in June 1860, when 8 Muslims and Hindus arrived with the camels for the Burke and Wills expedition. The next arrival of camel drivers was in 1866, when 31 men from Rajasthan and Baluchistan arrived in South Australia. Although they came from several countries, they were usually known in Australia as Afghans, and they brought with them the first formal establishment of Islam in Australia. Cameliers settled in the areas near Alice Springs and other areas of the Northern Territory, and intermarried with the indigenous population. The Adelaide, South Australia to Darwin, Northern Territory, Railway is named the Ghan, short for the Afghan, in their memory. During the 1870s, Muslim Malay divers were recruited through an agreement with the Dutch to work on Western Australian and Northern Territory pearling grounds. By 1875, there were 1,800 Malay divers working in Western Australia. One of the earliest recorded Islamic festivals celebrated in Australia occurred on the 23rd of July 1884, when 70 Muslims assembled for Eid prayers at Albert Park, Melbourne. In the 1920s and 1930s, Albanian Muslims arrived to the country. The Albanian community in far north Queensland settled in the area in the early 20th century, searching for work in the sugarcane and tobacco industries. With many descendants still living in Mariba, Cairns, and other small towns across the Atherton tablelands. The perceived need for population growth and economic development in Australia led to the broadening of Australia's immigration policy in the post-World War II period. This allowed for the acceptance of a number of displaced white European Muslims, who began to arrive from other parts of Europe, mainly from the Balkans, especially from Bosnia and Herzegovina. With the increase in immigration of Muslims after the war from countries such as Cyprus, Bosnia, Albania, Kosovo, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, and Russia, the Islam in Australia developed its characteristic plurality. Later, between 1967 and 1971, approximately 10,000 Turkish citizens settled in Australia, under an agreement between Australia and Turkey. Larger-scale Muslim migration of non-white non-European Muslims began in 1975 with the migration of Lebanese Muslims. Lebanese Muslims are still the largest and highest-profile Muslim group in Australia. In 1990, trade and educational links have been developed between Australia and several Muslim countries. Muslim students from countries such as Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan are among the thousands of international students studying in Australian universities. By the beginning of the 21st century, Muslims from more than 60 countries had settled in Australia. While a very large number of them come from Bosnia, Turkey, and Lebanon, there are Muslims from Indonesia, Malaysia, Iran, Fiji, Albania, Sudan, Somalia, Egypt, the Palestinian territories, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, among others. The first mosque in Australia was built in 1861 at Maree, South Australia. Maree Mosque was built with mud, and is no longer standing. The Great Mosque of Adelaide was built in 1888 by the descendants of the Afghan Cameliers. Albanian Muslims built the first mosque in Shepparton, Victoria, 1956 to 1960. First mosque in Melbourne in 1967, and another in 1968, and a mosque in Mareeba, Far North Queensland in 1969. The Australian Muslim community has built approximate 340 mosques in Australia, and a number of Islamic schools, and a number of imams and clerics act as the community's spiritual and religious leaders. In 1988, the Australian Federation of Islamic Councils appointed Sheikh Taj el-Din Hilali as the first Grand Mufti of Australia. In 2007, Hilali was succeeded by Fahmy Naji in June 2007, who was succeeded by the current Grand Mufti, Ibrahim Abu Muhammad, in September 2011.